I'm delighted to introduce our next guest, Natania Jansz. Nat was one of the co-founders of the Rough Guide travel series. She and her partner, Mark Elliman, set up the independent publishing company Sort of Books in 1999 to publish a few hand-picked and fiction and non-fiction titles each year. They discovered an old copy of Tove Jansson's iconic picture book, the book about Moomin, Mimble, and Little Mai, and their republished edition was an instant success. This was followed by the classic Tove Jansson title, The Summer Book, in 2003. Sort of Books is now the proud publisher of UK editions of 21 children and adult titles by Tove Jansson, and there is more to follow. Thank you for joining us, Nat. We're so happy to have you here today. Now, Nat, I think it's more than fair to say that you and Mark at Sort of Books were responsible for that first wave of the Tove Jansson revival in the UK by republishing her colour picture books and bringing out translations of her adult fiction. And I know this has been a real labour of love for you both, a real passion project. Can you tell us what it is about Tove's work that's so special for you?
I think we'll need the whole day for that. There's this extraordinary thing. We came to Tove's oeuvre. We had this great void in our childhoods, in that we didn't read the Moomins as children, but that sort of gave us that sort of zeal of converts when we were older. And the extraordinary thing was, well, we first came across the Moomins, as you said, Caitlin, through the book about Moomin, Mimble, and Little Mai, which I'm going to hold up. So we sort of came to Tove's work through her art, which seems very relevant. That Mark was in Seattle and found this really tatty old book and brought it home, and we were just amazed. You know, this was a book that was published in the early 50s, barely, I mean, it came out in English, but didn't really, you know, so many of Tove's books, when they came out apart from the actual Moomin books, her adult books and these colour picture books, they were like sort of fireworks and in a misty day, you know, they burst and then did. And we found, we couldn't believe that in the 50s, there was this amazing, it sort of pulsates with colour. I've just got to show you, you know, it's just the most amazing colour, design, innovative design, well ahead of its time as a children's book. And we had to publish it. And when we published it, we then discovered there was this incredibly rich seam of Tove's work, which we had no idea about. And I think there was this, it was like this sort of, I suppose it was like a sort of miner sort of going to a shaft and finding this sort of ring to theme. He just found an author who was just so exciting to publish. Mm-hmm. In our sort of path of publishing Tove's work, we had these amazing mentors because, well, we met Sophia, which was, you know, that was extraordinary, meeting Tove's niece who'd grown up in her company, who knew everything about the Moomins, who knew about the context in which she produced her art and her literature. And also we met Helen Svensson, who was Tove's last editor at Schiltz, and had actually worked with her on some of her last books, on 2 of her last books. And she could sort of, they could direct us because, you know, the sad thing, not only did I not read the Moomins as a child, but came bang to them in adult life, but I also didn't speak Swedish or Finnish, which was, you know, a big disadvantage. And what they did was they directed us to the work that had been very, very much admired in Scandinavia and the qualities of that work. And we started getting them translated by the very brilliant Tom Teal, he'd first translated the Summer Book. And Helen Svensson sent me a copy of the Summer Book and said, I think you might be interested in publishing some more of Tove's work. And there is this thing that happens very rarely. All publishers, all editors speak of it, this great moment. It's sort of this epiphany moment where you hold a book that you might publish. It could be a manuscript, it could be a book, a book that you want to republish. and you sort of quiver as you hold it, because you know within the first chapter that you're reading something of such rare quality. And this was true. It was true of the summer book. We were just hooked from the first chapter. And I think it was something Ali Smith really channeled. She really gets across the great quality of this prose when she talks about the transparency of it, the deceptive simplicity that Tove writes in ways that seem to be not about that much, but about everything, really everything. And she winnows and winnows. She's a brilliant editor who winnows and winnows her work. So you're left with all that you need and only what you need. And that's so unusual. There's nothing extraneous. Everything builds to create the effect that she's trying to create in the reader. Sorry, I can tell, Kate, that I could go on.
It's a wonderful answer. And I feel very sorry for you, Nat, that you didn't have the Moomins in your childhood, but I think it was wonderful for the rest of us because it's given you this passion that's led you to go on and publish all of these beautiful books for the rest of us to enjoy. So something that we talked about.
Slightly overcompensated.
Yes.
Slightly overcompensated. No, you can't.
About it. Nat, we've talked before about how sometimes fans who are only familiar with the Moomins are surprised at how much Tove wrote for adults, and that actually sort of in the later part of her career, she worked really exclusively on books for adults. But as you've said, there's quite a natural progression from the later Moomin book to the adult novels that she wrote. Because of the kind of range of emotions. And I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about that progression.
Well, I think that Tove always put all of herself in all of her work. I think there's, she's one of those remarkable writers that never shortchanges a reader. So if she's writing for children, and I think there's a question to be asked about, was she writing for children or was she just writing for readers, including children? Which was extraordinary. I mean, certainly because of the way she produced her books and the beautiful illustrations. And I mean, yes, they were books for children, but, they have something, all of them have something for adults too. And as she progressed with the Moomin series, you could tell by the fourth book, by Moominland Midwinter, she'd shifted direction and she was starting to widen the repertoire of emotions. It wasn't that she went darker, but that she allowed different emotions to come in. And it's very interesting that the way her life it intercepts with her work. So that after her Moomin Summer Madness, the first four books have a real sort of charm. There's sort of a sunlit charm about them. They're very adventurous and fun and playful. I have to say, they also, in an amazing sort of prescience that she has about the natural world, they're very much set in the natural world that's under threat. So even in those first four books where it's all delight and fun and charm and parties, you have floods, comets crashing into Moominvalley, volcanoes erupting. It's not, none of it's, the world is a fragile place. And then she meets Tuti. She meets Tuliki Pietila, who and begins a relationship that's going to last for the next 4 decades. That's the rest of her life, and it's a very, very important relationship. And with Tuti, she sort of takes the risk of exploring deeper emotions and a range. So she brings in Moominland Midwinter. It was something she brings in ideas about isolation, children who feel lonely and how they deal with loneliness and find that they can't access the warmth and comfort of their family, and they're thrown on their own devices. And there's a very, very good author called Maggie O'Farrell in the UK who described the importance of that book to her as a child when she was very ill and she was sort of dealing with this illness and feeling very isolated. She read this book and suddenly it spoke to her. And that's what Tove's later Moomins do, which is they offer emotions that adults recognize, but children who wouldn't be able to come up with that, they couldn't name those feelings themselves, but those feelings are hugely validated by finding them in a book. So none of it goes over children's heads, but it moves in a more adult frame. And that's hugely, the last book, I would say, is one of the great books to deal with grief, deal with bereavement, deal with the idea of losing something that's important to you, because the Moomins have gone away. They might not come back. We think they do, but it's left slightly open. So, but there is this thing of, I think she was a writer who was wanting to extend her oeuvre, extend her repertoire. And then after that last book, Moominvalley, in November, she is free. Well, actually, just before that, she writes The Sculptor's Daughter, which has also immense charm, because it's a sort of drawing from a childhood experiences of being the child in a Bohemian family, and that's wonderful, and that paves the way for the summer book, which is a great breakthrough in 1970. And it's interesting. I think I was trying to think. It was, I was told by Johanna, who's part of the Moomin family, that they found a clip of Tove talking about Ham suggesting the theme of the summer book, and the summer book was published after Ham died, and there's something. There's a celebration of a relationship between the old and the young in the summer book that also carries within it ideas of mortality, which is so clever and so difficult to do, and yet the book's light and beautiful to read, But I think I'm going on again.
No, you just make me want to read everything. When you speak, it makes me want to read all of the books and struggle to pick which one to go for first.
Because also things can get darker as it moves on, but they're never dark in a way that leaves you with there's a darkness in which wisdom lies, and that's the extraordinary thing. So you always come away feeling that you've gained another insight, another layer of insight into the relationships that we have or wish to have.
Absolutely. The most recent book that you've published with sort of books is Letters from Tove, which is a collection of her correspondence with family and loved ones. You got it to show us. Beautiful. It's a gorgeous book. And it's very well known that Tove's life influenced her work. We know there are characters who are influenced by people that Tove knew in her life. What insights do you think fans of her writing would get from reading the letters?
Just sorting out the microphone here. Can you hear me, by the way? Is that okay? I think I was absolutely stunned when I read the letters, which are beautifully translated by Sarah Death, and amazingly curated. I mean, Tove wrote thousands of letters, and many of them, huge majority of them, would be answering her fans. And these are letters which are really close to her heart. I mean, these are the very, very personal letters that she wrote to the dearest, closest confidants, to lovers, male and female, to her family. And she reveals herself in the most extraordinary, intimate way. And reading them feels such a privilege. And I think we all have a fantasy when there's someone we admire, whose work we admire. We have a fantasy about what would it be like to be in that mind, to have that mind, that mindset, to immerse yourself and to see the world through that person's eyes, which good literature allows you to do. But there's something about reading letters which is different to reading an autobiography, because you're reading her thoughts in those times, and then seeing how they evolve. So seeing how relationships develop, seeing how she responds to the ups and downs, the mill of love, the betrayals, the great excitement and passions. And I felt that I learned, I'd say it's ridiculous to say I learned how to be Tove, but I felt this enormous privilege of just that way of, whenever being able to just open letters and just settle into a mindset that teaches you really interesting ways to respond to the world, and not just the pleasures of life, but, and the gratifications and, being successful, but also how to deal with the sort of, the ups and downs, the austere, the moments of disappointment and, all of those things. And there's something, and the letters, there are these letters that, there are letters she writes to her friend, Eva Konnikova, which are very much part of the film that we're going to be seeing at the end of the year. That, where you see the relationships that Tove has in a period after the war. And what's amazing is to then move, because she writes to her friend, her about all her feelings about what's happening to her life and her art. And then you see her writing to the people who she's talked to Eva about. And then you see her, it's like someone, that wonderful thing as she matures, as she develops, when she meets Tutti, you have the feeling of her coming into a sort of safe harbor and sort of she's learnt her life, she's learnt about life and she's really using it. And there's something so beautiful about the mature Tove writing to her lover Tutti and to her best friend Maya, just about life and what life can offer, and the sort of settling into never in a dull way, but just, she teaches you how to age well as well. I mean, I can't think of a life lesson that isn't in there, actually.
Yeah. One of the other truly wonderful and amazing things about Tove was that she was so accomplished and rounded as an artist. Of course, she was a writer, but she was a painter and a cartoonist, an illustrator. What do you think is special about the way that she combined her writing and her art?
Well, it's a good question, because there aren't many people. I mean, I was thinking in the children's literature world, we have Beatrix Potter, we have Lauren Child very, very effectively, but not many who can create as well the story and the text and the images, who really, where both are at the, the highest level of children's literature and illustration. And there's something about the aesthetic that there's two things. There's the aesthetic that she brings to both her writing and her artwork, where she's always, as a true artist, as a great artist, she's always exploring and experimenting. She's never happy with things, which is where the great editor comes in. If it's not good enough, throw it out, try it again, rewrite it. And the same, you feel that she sort of has these very exacting standards with her art and her literature. And there's that thing of being very, very conscientious. She never shortchanges. She always, whatever it is, whether it's making Moomin merchandise, whether it's, painting something to use for wallpaper or anything, she just puts herself into it. The standards are extraordinary, really extraordinary. I'm not sure if that's answered your question, but it's just so rare, isn't it, to have such a great artist and such a great writer combined.
Yeah. Nat, there might be people who are watching who are very familiar with the Moomins, but have never read one of the other books that Tove wrote for adults. What would you recommend as a starting point, and why?
Well, I think I have to, for someone who hasn't come across her work, her adult work before, I think I have to ask them to start where I did, with the summer book, because it's so accessible, and yet there's so much you can take out of it. It's a young child with her grandmother on a tiny island, and the young child has lost her mother, and the grandmother is clearly not, a bit frail, but very, but they really engage with each other. They play together. They care about each other, and they go through these. They have these little vignettes of their life on the island. They really just while away time, but they do it so creatively and so sympathetically. And there's something, these are also having an old person, a young person. These are people at the margins of most literature. You don't find a book as beautiful as that with the old and young together that hasn't an ounce of sentimentality about it. There's nothing sentimental or mawkish or anything. It's just that wonderful aesthetic that Tove brings. But I would then say read the next. I mean, there's some wonderful short stories. I could go on forever about the short stories, but from the novels, there's Fair Play and there's The True Deceiver, and read the summer book first, and then move on to those. The True Deceiver is a bit like a sort of dark winter companion to the summer book. One is light, and there's a sort of lightness and charm, and the other one has this sort of glittery, dark edge to it, which is really surprising and interesting. Ruth Rendell, the great crime writer, the late great crime writer, loved The True Deceiver, and which is unusual. It's got no body count, it's sort of a useless crime book because there's no, but it's just so gripping, and you don't know who is preying on who in this book, and it's clever and psychological. And Fair Play, I think, is the great romantic book. Every Valentine's Day, it's the book that I trot out because it's two women in their sort of 70s, 60s and 70s, two artists showing you how a relationship can endure, how familiarity doesn't have to breed contempt, how it can constantly renew itself by tact, by tolerance, by just being careful of each other's creativity and freedoms. It's wonderful.
Something we say a lot is that the world needs the work of Tove Jansson more than ever these days. And I think a big part of that comes from the values that are, very prominent in the Moomin stories, but I think also in her wider work. Would you agree? Do you think that's the sentiment of these books being so relevant, as relevant today as when they were first written? It's true, isn't it?
I think I completely agree with you. I couldn't agree more. It was interesting that the Guardian ran a piece by the author, the very, very great nature writer, Melissa Harrison, about her favourite book. And over the period of lockdown, a lot of people have described their favourite book as being the summer book. And it's because of its focus that you've got these two people and they're on an island. Okay, they've got this lovely island, but it's a tiny island. And they expand their horizon by the way they take care of each other's space and allow each other to be themselves without intruding too much, but also being supportive. And they focus on the microcosm that they're in. And that's an extraordinary thing, taking care of the details of the landscape that they're in and heeding it very closely, and also taking care of each other in this very careful way. But I think Tove's, her the way she described nature, her love of nature, the values, she was a bohemian, but what comes across in all of her books is that we're facing crises, and the way to do that is to be more communal, more inclusive. But it's interesting. The very first Moomin book, Moomins and the Great Flood, begins with two migrants, two people searching through floods for a lost husband and father, and it's little Moomin and his mother, Moomin mother, with a handbag. Everything is in a handbag. It still is by the end of the series, but it's that, and these books, of course, they leap at us now when we think about looking after nature, when we think about climate change. Moomin Papa at Sea has, for good reason, been the book chosen for this wonderful campaign about trying to save the Baltic Sea. from eutrophication, where the pH goes too high, the acidity levels go too high, and algal blooms form. But it's, of course, it's wonderful that the Moomin Company are trying to enlist help in trying to do something which will help all of our seas eventually. Which will, those values are, there's that, and the inclusiveness. When you look at the crisis of, we're in a situation where there's going to be a much bigger crisis about people needing to leave their countries and find refuge. And Moominvalley has always been a place that people could turn up. It's fictional, but you turn up, and all you need to do is arrive. You're not put through any tests. You don't need to be a particularly great character. You can even be, a curmudgeonly or a off-putting character. It doesn't matter. But you turn up, and a place is laid for you at the table. A wooden bench is put so that you can sleep. A place is found. It's not just tolerating; it's including and accepting and welcoming that they do. So yeah.
So we're very much agreed that the world needs more Tove Jansson. So what sort of books publishing next? What do you have in the pipeline for us?
Well, we're very, very excited. Next year, we're bringing out a paperback, of course, of Letters from Tove, so there'll be more of those. And next year, we're going to publish a very beautiful project that Tove and Tutti worked on together in the latter part of their life, called Notes from an Island. And it's where Tove is, it began with her sort of annotating some very beautiful monochrome pictures of the sea that Tutti did. And there's a sort of meditative beauty to these pictures. And she then adds more and more text. And it's such a sort of work of labor of love between two women who share a life, share love, to, share an approach to creativity and art. So that's going to be something very special for next year.
Great. Well, we can't wait to see it. And my last question for you, the question I'm asking everybody, the most difficult question of the day. What would you give Tove as a birthday present today?
Well, I think I've got two answers to that. One is I think I'd give her peace and quiet to allow her something she said, which was so wise, which is, as you get older, or any time in your life, the most precious thing for an artist is the urge to create, and anything that disrupts that is a loss. So what I wish for Tove is, and anyone like Tove, is the urge to have the peace and quiet to discover that urge, and to be totally selfish. I think I'd like to give her some beautiful writing paper so she can write me a letter with a lovely picture on it. Because I'm so envious of people who had those.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you, Nat, so much for sharing your knowledge with us today. It's been brilliant talking with you. Really fascinating. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I look forward to more Tove publishing from you.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to introduce my final guest, last but not least, Akiya Henry. Akiya is a talented stage and screen actress with numerous film and television credits, including on the BBC's Casualty, Little Britain and Doctors. She recently starred as Lady Macbeth in Kit Murphy's film adaptation of Macbeth, and is a regular collaborator with the National Theatre, the RSC and the Young Vic. She voices many popular characters on children's TV shows, including Snorkmaiden in the animated series Moominvalley. Welcome, Akiya. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to be able to talk to you today and learn a little bit more about the world of animation and how Moominvalley came together. So our first question actually is a fan question that's been submitted. And the question is, did you have any connection to the Moomin stories, for example, reading the books or watching a previous adaptation when you were little, that made you particularly want to be a part of this project?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, really interestingly, I grew up with the Moomins. The books were read to us when we were little. I remember the book Who Will Comfort Toffel, and I think mainly I remember it because of what the amazing Nat was saying previously was about all of the incredible illustrations. But another book which really kind of sticks out in my mind from when I was little was Moomin Summer Madness. Purely because I think I came out of the womb literally wanting to be on the stage. And so, I think, and so when that book was read to me, it kind of really connected with me in a sense of just, not just in terms of the beauty of all of the characters and the journey that they went on, but also what Tove did with in terms of theatre. And actually, it's hard work. Theatre is hard work, but the reward at the end of it is incredible. And so, yeah, so that book like really, really resonated with me. And then I remember the series. I grew up watching the series. So when the opportunity came up to play Snorkmaiden, I jumped at it because it just took me back to my little self, you know. You wouldn't want to, you know.
Of course, that's amazing. I love that Tove almost set you off on the path to becoming an actor in addition to love the story. She set you off on your career path. Now, one of the things that's often noted about the Moomin stories, and we've touched on it a little bit today, is that they're so appealing to adults and children at the same time. They're so rich. And I imagine that's something that really stood out to you when you were going back to them in preparation for the animation.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about sort of, you know, that definitely comes through for me in Moominvalley too, but sort of what's your perspective on that?
I think it's really, I think one of the most powerful things about the Moomins, and one of the things that I'm witnessing now, being an auntie to like nieces and nephews who are being introduced to the world of Moomins and Moominvalley, is just how universal and timeless her messages within and the themes within the books are. And watching little people, young people reconnecting with these stories right now is so incredibly powerful. I remember one niece really connected with Moominvalley in November because of this sense of grief and loss. And at the time she was experiencing that. And it really helped her in terms of her grieving process and her healing. But also as well, just this thing about the books, which is about being able to have fun and be yourself and love everybody, no matter who you are in the world. That's the greatness about all of these stories, and kind of rediscovering them by being in Moominvalley, the series, is that it's allowing us to kind of understand just how important it is to just accept everybody, because everybody is beautiful regardless of their quirks or, you know, the idiosyncrasies. But the world can be a beautiful place if we enjoy it and enjoy each other. And I think that's an incredible message to be sharing, you know, not just back then when they were originally written, but for now.
Yeah, that's so lovely. Such a lovely perspective on it. You, of course, play Snorkmaiden, and I think we can see you've got a very beautiful Snorkmaiden necklace. Lovely to have the divine Snorkmaiden. So cute. So she as a character, I think, is quite a complicated one, and she's quite complex. She could be easily misunderstood. I think she's a little bit vain sometimes, but that's not all that there is to her. She's got such depth. And I remember the first time that I heard an episode that featured Snorkmaiden, I was just so happy to hear your voice and how perfectly you did it, because I think it's exactly right. You've totally nailed the character. I would love to hear a bit about how you see the character, how you interpret her.
It's the same as you in a way. She's a very complex character, I think. And when I first started just thinking about, you know, how to portray Snorkmaiden, and also talking to our director about, you know, what the arc of her storyline was going to be and who she is really in the world of Moominvalley. This thing about vanity came up a lot for me, and how people some people refer to her as being extremely vain. And sometimes when I was reading it, I was a bit like, oh, it's being seen in kind of like this really negative way. And actually now, in the world that we're living in now, in terms of women, young girls, young ladies, I think vanity actually can be a really positive thing, because for me, when I was reading, rereading the stories with Snorkmaiden and her character, I just thought actually what she represents for me is self-love, is being able to really enjoy who you are. Self-care, when she's combing her hair and taking care of herself, that's self-care, and then also this beautiful quality that she has, which is about being extremely supportive to characters within the stories, but also at the same time going, I know what I need to do. I know that I can help this situation. So I'm just going to gently nudge you in the right direction, which I think we've explored a lot more in the series, which I think is really, really great. And then there's her heart. I think her heart is so beautiful. And she's very generous and very, very giving. And the relationship that she has with her little brother and with Moomin Troll, and also just the family, I think it's stunning. And so what I really wanted to encompass when thinking about how to portray her was just all of those beautiful, complex qualities that could possibly be seen quite negatively, but actually owning them as a really positive thing, as an empowering thing, rather than something that's quite negative and quite disempowering,
Love that. I love it. And I love that she's also she's a bold character, and that comes through. I was watching the Hobgoblin's Hat episode again recently, and I love when Moomin Troll's on this pink cloud and he's sort of terrified and he needs her help. And she rescues him, she does the job, she reels him in, but then she doesn't want to just leave it that. She wants to get on the cloud and go off on an adventure. And I think that strength and that boldness is really important. So she's got lots of different characteristics. I think she can't be reduced to kind of her appearance. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And there's also something about what you're talking about in terms of her strength and her boldness, which I think is something that Tove really tries to represent in all of the books, which is, in order to go to see the world and embrace life, you do have to live it. And sometimes that means taking some risks. Sometimes that means facing a fear. Sometimes it means just giving someone a helping hand. And I think Snorkmaiden encompasses all of that, which is really beautiful.
Amazing. So when you were preparing for the role, I imagine you did lots of reading, but how else did you approach it? Did you think about other characters that she might be similar to, or was it really kind of taken from the text?
Okay, so this is a funny story. So are you ready?
Yeah.
So when I found out that I was playing Snorkmaiden, I was on my way. I was doing a show at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre, and so I was on my way driving from London to Bristol. And our lovely director called me, and he was like, "Is this a bad time?" I was like, "No, not at all. I'm on the motorway. I shouldn't be talking whilst I'm driving, but I'll stop in a minute." So he basically was like, I was just thinking about, how you're feeling about the character Snorkmaiden. I thought it might be good to have a chat about it. So we had a really great chat about her. And one of the things that came up, and he was like, I don't know why, but I just keep thinking about Towie in terms of her voice. So he was like, maybe, I don't know, do you want to go watch a bit of Towie? And I was like,
for people outside of the UK, that's the only way is Essex, which is a reality TV show.
Yeah. So he was like, Towie, I'm thinking about Paloma Faith. Like, I was like, okay, this is really, really interesting. And he was like, there's just something which is like really bright about the voice, but actually as well at the same time, we can still capture the intelligence of her. So I went away and I watched some Towie.
Fantastic.
It's quite addictive when you start. And so I watched some Towie, and then we had a little play. When it was time for me to go into the studio, we had a little play. And I think one of my reservations was I didn't want to make her sound too set within an accent. So we thought it might be really good to kind of explore a middle ground, which was so the voices, some of the characters from Towie, but then also the tonal quality of my voice. So that's how we ended up with the voice of Snorkmaiden.
Wonderful. I love that story. That's the first time I've heard it, but I'm delighted. We've had a great question now from Emma Blackman on social media asking if you see any of Snorkmaiden within yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think I definitely do. I think there's something really wonderful about being an actor, is that you can always explore characters that you think are removed from yourself, but actually there's always an element of that character within you to be discovered if you're not conscious of it. And I think definitely with Snorkmaiden, I think her brightness, her sunshine and her joy, I think I carry a lot of that. But I also think there's something really lovely, which I spoke about earlier, which is about just her self-love, you know, and this thing about, I'm just going to go out and love everybody and nurture everybody. I'm a nurturer.
Wonderful.
Snorkmaiden definitely, I think I'm definitely connected to Snorkmaiden in that respect. Yeah.
I see that in you. I see that the brightness that you're talking about. I can definitely see that you have these traits in common. And as you know, I think you're totally perfect for the part, and I was so delighted. So now I'd like to ask you a bit more about the animation process, because to anyone outside of that world, it's quite like a mysterious and magical thing how an animation comes together, because there are so many people working on it, from the kind of script writers to the storyboarders to the artists to, of course, the amazing voice talent. So tell us how it comes together. How do you do your part? How does it all fit together?
Well, so in terms of me, I spend a lot of time in a booth with a microphone. And really interesting during obviously this Rona, because a lot of people have the creative team been working remotely. So usually I'm in a booth and the creative team are in the opposite room, and I get my scripts usually the week before to have a read and prep. And I go into the booth and everybody's there, and we just play. You know, we go over our lines. I'm not usually with the rest of the cast, so it's usually always individual due to everybody's schedules. And so I have my voice director who has all of the voices in his head. So when we go through the script, he's basically being everybody else, which I'm always amazed at.
That's quite cool.
Yeah, it's incredible. But we just play, and that's what's really lovely, I think, about the world of voiceover, is it kind of reflects all of the things that Moominvalley kind of mean to me, which is I get to just play and enjoy discovering different ideas and voices within the context of what I'm portraying. So that's us. But there's another world which I think we don't necessarily give it enough enough visibility, which is just all of the incredible animators and writers that spend 2 to 3 years making the beautiful visuals come to life. Because I can sit in a booth and I might get to see some of the animatrix, which is kind of like a penciled version of what the episode will look like.
It's like a black and white line drawing, isn't it?
Yeah. and then finally, you know, the episodes are screened, are aired, and you go, wow, this is absolutely incredible. And I don't get to meet any of these amazing people that have all of this talent, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they work so hard. So we've got to give thanks to all of them because they are amazing.
I think it's fascinating to understand how it all comes together, and that you often don't see the final thing until it's, you know, until it's available for the public, because you've done your lines and you've seen the line drawings, but it only all comes together right towards the end.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about so I know that you usually record your part in a studio on your own.
Mm-hmm.
How do you create that sort of chemistry or relationships with the other characters if it's kind of just you on your own? That seems like to me.
That's a really great question. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think moving on to series 2, because you get to see like all of the voices together in its entirety after series 1. You kind of have a sense of all of the voices in your head. But during series 1, like I said, our voice director was so incredible because he literally has all of the voices in his head, and to a T, not just it's this person just saying this, that, the other. He actually has every single character, and he can present it in the most. I'm like, hang on a second, is that Rosamund? Is that Kate? And so actually, it makes it a lot easier to be able to build a chemistry even when you don't have your other cast members there. Because actually the director is giving you so much to play off. And I think also I've got to give a big up to the writers, because the way that they write, it makes it very, very easy to be able to build a chemistry without anybody present, because the writing is so brilliant and so clear. So so it's kind of like a mixture of all of those things, I think.
Amazing. Great answer. What is the thing that you've treasured the most about being a part of this experience and being a part of Moominvalley?
Oh my gosh, the sheer joy of the project. I mean, it's just been, I go into work and I laugh for 4 hours every session, you know, and I smile and I'm inspired, and it's joy, it's just pure joy. But also another thing I've really, well, 2 more things actually, is being able to have an opportunity to reconnect with Tove's work, but also as well, just all of the fans. Like, that's something that is really quite joyous as well, is just seeing just how committed and how loving and how generous and how brilliant they are in relation to the work, to these stories, and also being really generous to us as well. Because I can remember when we first started, we had a big conversation about how we were all really nervous, because this is it's a massive project, you know, but also to be able to be really truthful to the books, to her stories, you know. So the pressure was on. And actually, I have to admit, it's been the fans actually that have alleviated that pressure because of their beautiful, loving support. So it's a mixture of all of those things for me. Yeah, it's magical.
The fans are brilliant. And I think I've been particularly impressed with all the questions that they've submitted. Here is a really good one for you, Akiya.
Okay.
Someone has asked, what would you ask for from the Hobgoblin's hat?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Ask for.
It's tricky because quite often they go wrong with the Hobgoblin's
Yeah, they
hat.
do, don't they?
Very careful.
You know what, actually, I think I would ask for the world that I live in to be a little bit more Moomin, a little bit more Moomin
Oh,
That's what I would ask for.
that's lovely. And I don't see any way that could go wrong, to
No.
be honest.
Unless Smith comes out and gets up to his usual mischief, who knows?
From havoc. Now we've got a question from Amber, who I think has posted this on Facebook. She'd like to hear a little bit more about Snorkmaiden's arc and her character growth.
Oh wow, that's a great question. It's a really great question. Yeah, I think in it you start to see her growth more in season 2. I think in season 1 it is kind of like establishing her relationship with all of the Moomin characters, and also establishing her relationship with Moomin Troll. But I think what's been quite beautiful in terms of her growth is we're starting to see her come fully into her own and taking control of what that is, but also as well in terms of her growth in relation to emotional growth, you know, which is about understanding that sometimes you have to let things go in order to let things come back. If you really love something, sometimes you have to let it go. But also as well, this thing about standing up for yourself, like the Winter Follies episode for me is such a brilliant episode in relation to her acknowledging that it's not okay for someone to be mistreated in that, and her standing up for herself and for the people that she loves, and telling Mr. Brisk to go take a running jump, you know. I think and I think we explore that more in season 2. We explore more about her as a young lady, you know, and I think that's what's really brilliant about the arc and her growth in relation to the series. And who knows, maybe there will be more.
I'm sure we're all hoping for that. Akiya, do you have a favorite episode or storyline in particular?
Oh gosh, that's really hard. Oh, there's 3 episodes that I really love. The first one is the Fire Spirit. I think that is just such a beautiful, touching episode. I think the next one for me is Moomin Winter Follies, because Snorkmaiden literally represents women's rights. Symbol of #MeToo. And then the last one for me is The Last Dragon in the World. I think that, I cried after I finished watching that episode. Because it's just so, once again, just really, really touching. And like Nat was saying about Tove, how she presents something, it can be seen as so simple, but actually underneath the complexities of what is being expressed is there. And I think The Last Dragon in the World for me really represents that. And the performances in that episode are so beautiful as well.
Brilliant. Now we've had some requests here for you to do a little bit of Snorkmaiden. I don't know if you remember any of her lines there that you'd be able to deliver for us.
I'm not quite sure if I can deliver her lines, but I definitely I can talk about you know, just how wonderful she is, and that, you know, it's just really grateful that she's here today. And I'm not sure about it, but I think there's just something really wonderful about being here, and all of you
Amazing.
watching, you know, just thank you.
Fantastic. So good. I didn't know. I was nervous to ask you that question because I didn't want to put you on the spot too much, but you could just flick straight into it.
We try.
Brilliant. I love that. And you can hear actually how this is like the qualities of your own voice and how you've kind of combined it with other influences. So good. Thank you. What a treat. And then I'm going to ask you my final question, which I hope you've been preparing for. What would you give Tove as a birthday present today?
Oh my gosh, this is such a hard question. I think literally this has kept me awake at night. What do you give to the amazing couple? Yeah, what do you give to somebody that has given us so much? Well, I think so. The Dulwich Picture Gallery did this incredible exhibition, and I took my niece, who was, I think she was 8 at the time, and there was lots of like activities for young people, and she ended up, she got very excited about the Moomins, but she ended up, there was a section which was Tove's self-portraits, which were really beautiful. Anyway, the next day she woke up and she started making little flowers out of African fabric. This fabric in particular is known as Ankara. And I asked her, like, okay, where has this all come from? And she went, it's because of that picture of Tove yesterday. So wow. I think I would give Tove those beautiful flowers that my niece created, because it's a reminder of just how much she inspires everybody, young and old. And the fact that my niece came away from that exhibition waking up the next day and going, my creativity has been awakened, that is all thanks to her. So I would want to give her those flowers.
Brilliant. Everyone has really delivered with the answers to that question today. I've been so impressed.
You kept us awake though, Caitlin. You kept us awake.
I do apologise, but it was worth it. Akiya, thank you so much for bringing some of that magic of Moominvalley to us today. It was really wonderful to talk to you.